Hey guys, welcome to the I Hope to Hear This podcast. And we have a very special guest with us today. She came from very far. This Miss Christina Martinez.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. It wasn't that far. It was about an hour.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I actually work in that area.
Okay.
Well, right next to the SunTrust Park.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's traffic, it gets so
It's
crazy.
so bad. I mean, but
Yeah.
it shouldn't have been trafficy. It's
Yeah.
Saturday, but
Yeah.
it's Atlanta, you know?
And the rain and all that, people forget how to drive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here. And today, my goal is to kind of capture your story. And as a side effect of that, I'm wanting as many people to learn about the collective effect as possible. So if we could just kind of start from the beginning about, who you are, how you grew up and all that kind of stuff, your kind of background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to share. So I was born in Tampa, Florida. And so I'm originally from there, but I grew up I'm half Korean, half Mexican. So grew up in a multiracial home. My dad was in the military. And so we moved around a lot. We went to Korea and grew up in Korea for the first part of my life. And then we moved back to Florida when I was 6. And so, just moved around and moved from Washington to Florida, all that sort of stuff. But for most of my life, just really wasn't able to plant roots. And so that's what my childhood looked like. And just spent most of my adolescent life in America, which was really great. But Korean was my first language, which people don't know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, especially with the last name Martinez. So yeah, but I think relating to my story now, like because of being half, I just feel like I didn't really fit in at school. I wasn't like white enough at school. I wasn't Asian enough at church. I went to Korean church. And so a lot of my life was growing up was trying to figure out where I fit in and feeling a sense of belonging. And so a big part of my story is, finding Jesus when I was 13 and that feeling of him knowing who I am and all of me and accepting me for who I am and finding a place of belonging in him. I found my identity for the first time. And so even at the age of 7 or 8, I remember just thinking in my bed, like, where do I belong? Like, where are my people at?
Yeah.
I haven't met another half Korean and half Mexican like ever in my life. So I'm like, who are my people? But I really found my place in him. And so that's a big part of my story and why I do what I do now.
Do you speak Spanish as well?
No, I wish I did because I feel like it'd be super useful,
Right.
especially in my current job right now. And so,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, and I would love to get into that in a little bit as well. So you said you grew up in a Korean church. Is that just because you went to church with your mom?
Yeah. So my parents weren't believers, but my mom was trying to find a place of belonging. And so anytime we moved, she always tried to find a Korean church to find community. And so I just found myself hopping around to different Korean churches wherever we went and identifying more with my Korean side because my grandmother lived with us growing up. And so she kind of helped raise me.
Yeah.
And so I felt more comfortable there, but I also felt very excluded there as well.
Yeah.
I think in Florida, Mexicans are like seen as migrant workers who work in the fields and they call them strawberry pickers, that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of derogatory comments that would be said towards me or said towards other Mexicans, but not thinking the fact that I'm also Mexican.
Right.
And so just went through a lot of like hurtful stages within the church where I just think people didn't realize that it was hurtful. Like when we would go to retreats, they would change my last name to my mom's maiden name. So I'd be like Myung Pak instead of like Christina Martinez or Myung Martinez. And so there were just like little jabs here and there that I just felt like they don't like me for all of me, and there's something wrong with me. And so it's always feeling embarrassed of either side, wherever I was.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, and the heartbreaking part about that is like the second generation Korean Americans, they also go through kind of a smaller version of a identity crisis too.
Yeah.
But the fact that they can't help other people going through it as well, it's just, kids are just,
Kids are kids.
yeah.
But adults are also.
No, yeah.
an issue.
Yeah, that's the worst. Yeah, but yeah. So, anyways, moving forward. So you said you moved around a lot. When did you actually kind of? Because you've been in Atlanta for a while, right? How long were you here, and how did you kind of plant your roots here?
Yeah, so I spent most of my life in Florida. Anytime we moved, we kind of came back. And so I finished off high school there and went to college at University of South Florida. I studied piano, classical, and then, but I got carpal tunnel my first semester of college.
No.
So I had to switch from performance to music history. And so switched that and figured out like while I was in college, I don't know, we were in this time and stage in like church life where you're like waiting to hear the audible word of God to tell you what to do with your life. And so I almost put my life on hold. I was like, well, I'm good at this. I have a scholarship. Let me just continue until I figure out what I'm supposed to do. Like, what's my calling, Lord? And I never really got that. And so 4 years went by so quickly and I graduated. And from there, went to Berkeley up in Boston, Berkeley College of Music for a semester. I really wanted to do music business or like recording. And it was very expensive. So after a semester, decided to move back. And my parents moved to Georgia, North Georgia for a job. And so I just followed them during that time because it was during the 2009, 2010 like recession.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to find a job. And so for the time being, just kind of found, support through my parents. And so moved in with them. And I've been here for 11 years now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when you were studying music business and recording and all that, were you kind of envisioning you entering the music industry?
Yeah, I really wanted to. I loved music and I felt like I had a good ear to figure out like what's wrong, what could enhance this experience. And so with recording, that's something that you can also, I don't really like being in the spotlight. So I never wanted to be like the artist out in front, but I love the behind work and just encouraging the artist and encouraging the project on like what could elevate this to the next level. And so I loved that. And so that's why I was kind of leaning more towards that.
Oh, I see. So then the main topic of discussion today, going into the collective effect. I'm just wondering, how did you kind of get into that? I can see a little bit of how your upbringing might have influenced your want to start the collective effect, but what was the trigger point? Like, what made you say, okay, I'm going to do this and start this organization?
Yeah. In college, I was a part of this movement called Invisible Children. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
It's about like, is it slavery and sexual trafficking?
That's
and all that
totally involved. But Invisible Children featured the child soldier movement. So with Joseph Kony in northern Uganda, and he was abducting children, and just they did an amazing job going to college campuses and spreading the word. And so first heard about Uganda through Invisible Children. And then I was a huge fan of Darlene Zschech. So the reason why I went into music in college was because like she influenced my life so much. And so I wanted to influence other people's lives through music the way that she did for me. And she was doing a conference in Uganda through an organization called Watoto. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Uganda.
Right.
But there were seeds being planted throughout. And I went to Passion Conference in maybe 2009 or 10 and heard from the founders of Watoto, Marilyn Skinner and her husband. And so she was talking about the whole child soldier situation and how they have started rescuing orphans, and they have thousands of orphans in their care. And they've also brought in widows. And so they place them in family units and create villages of them. And so I was like so moved at that moment. And I think leading up to that moment was just like lots of seeds being planted. And at that moment, I was like, I'm going. And so that summer, I went to volunteer at Watoto in their babies' home. And it was about 50 babies who had been either abandoned or orphaned through different circumstances. And so going there for the first time, my eyes were open to extreme poverty and just different levels of yeah, like issues that I had known about, but hadn't actually seen for myself. And at that moment, I think tying back to my story of feeling like I never belonged, I think it's like a calling of mine, and why I wake up every day is to bring the outsiders in, and how can I be a voice for the marginalized, and how can I create a place of belonging for people, whether that's, there's a group of us at a restaurant and I see there's two people who aren't really engaged in conversations, which group parties really stress me out because I'm concerned the entire night
Right,
and I don't really get to enjoy the evening. But
wow.
yeah, I feel like it's a deep rooted sense of me to bring people in, to bring a place of belonging for them. And so I think that's what led me to the collective effect, was the fact that like alone you could do something, but together, like collectively, like we can have a huge effect in the world.
Oh, wow.
And so bringing a sense of community and belonging for people who can do something to step into the gap to help people who can't do something, or they can, but they just need someone to partner with them. And so was moved by lots of different stories and experiences while I was there. Yeah.
Wow. So the root of it was Uganda. And I know you guys, like a month ago, came back from a big group trip to Uganda, right? So, I know Uganda is kind of something that's in your heart, but as Collective Effect, what is kind of your vision and purpose as an organization?
Yeah. So how we started, I actually didn't want to be a nonprofit, period. I tend to be a person who doesn't like to do things that other people are doing. And there's this huge bandwagon of like all these Christians starting nonprofits. There's this movement of it a couple of years ago. And I was like, I am not starting one. And so I was trying to creatively think about how we can create change, but not through a traditional way of a nonprofit. Maybe we can do this like organically and through grassroots, but we need money. And so I was like, I'm starting a for-profit and I'm going to decide how we're going to use that money, and it's going to affect people in a positive way. That kind of flunked.
Hey, why do you think? So I remember a long time ago, it was Blair. She was, either she shared the website or she was talking about purchasing something from the Collective Effect. So was that during your whole for-profit time period?
Probably.
So then what do you feel like kind of failed, quote unquote?
I think part of it was just lack of capacity to really fuel that. And I think I just didn't have a great business plan. I just was like, I'm going to start this. I loved working with local artisans and really bringing value to the community there. But yeah, so we started designing different products, partnering with them, bringing the products over.
Like them as in people in Uganda? Oh, wow.
Yeah. So we are partnering with artisans there. And so bringing those products over and selling them. But my role at the time at my job was really demanding as well. And so it was really hard. Also just being respectful of the leadership at that when I was at that job, and making sure that they didn't feel like my attention was divided.
Right.
So it was hard to really push that to what I would have loved to push, that business and season into. But yeah.
So then the kind of business aspect of the Collective Effect kind of faded away. But obviously the Collective Effect is still here. So how did you kind of keep that going?
Yeah. So it actually really happened super organically. I continue to go to Uganda every year since that first time, and connected with this girl named Lydia. I started to have a heart towards the people group from Karamoja, which is a northeastern region of Uganda. And they are the most marginalized people in Uganda. A big percentage of the kids living on the streets are from that region.
Oh, wow.
And that's her story. And she grew up on the streets and has a, quote, typical street child story. And she had a heart for her people as well. And so we got connected, and she started rescuing kids on her own and was like, I need help.
Wow.
And so I just kind of jumped alongside her and, 2 years later, 3 years later, we have 20 kids in our home. So we have a transitional home for kids who were living on the streets in Uganda. And so she cares for them. And we just work together to try to, help these 20 kids. But that's just kind of a Band-Aid to the actual situation. And so we have dreams in the future to help do preventative care for that. But overall picture of collective effect, long-term vision would be to champion people who are living in extreme poverty through education, medical care, nourishment, trade. The idea is to try to keep families together. I think it's not as sexy as give to this, I don't know, orphanage. That's easy to market, but it's hard to be like, would you give $45 a month to help this mom stay with her child?
Right. Yeah.
It's harder, but really want to think about sustainable ways to really bring value to the people that we're working with.
Wow. So when you said you went every year, did you go with an organization, or was it just you just packed your bags and just went to Uganda?
Yeah, the first 2 years I went through a Toto. I have a sponsored child through them. So when I first met him, he was 3 months old. Now he's 9.
Wow.
Yes, it's been really cool to see him grow up each year. But after those first 2 years, I just kind of went on my own.
Wow.
And so went on my own, brought a friend. And then once we started Collective, we started bringing teams over to be able to experience, what we've experienced and to really now for them to be able to love on the kids that we have in our care. So
okay. So I know you recently came back from a trip to Uganda. Some of my previous guests, like Jane Moe, James Rowe, they were part of the team. So do you take a team like that there every year?
We started to, yeah. So
wow.
This is the 3rd year that we've taken teams. And we tend to go during Thanksgiving break because people have multiple days off during that week.
Right.
And so it just works out a little easier. But yeah, we started taking teams. We call them vision trips instead of mission trips. And the reason why we use that word is because I think there's this false, I don't know, it feels, kind of white savior-esque that we're going for a week and we're going to change their lives forever.
Yeah.
I believe that God will use us in a day or in an instant.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But I think that idea of I'm going to go and I'm going to make their lives better in a week is so not correct. And so we use the word vision trips because at the end of the day, I believe that God is going to just open our eyes to his love for the world and for the people of the world. And so that's the goal, is that they would get to go and experience the beauty and the brokenness of Uganda, and also just to be able to spend quality time with the kids that we have in our care, because the love that Lydia shows them, who cares for them, is a little different than our Western style of loving. We're a little more physical. We are softer. We tend to be more relational.
Yeah.
Versus the caregiver role that she takes, which is taking care of their needs. And so I think it really fills their cup to have that one-on-one attention as well, and to have a different kind of love portrayed to them. And so, yeah.
I see. So so Lydia is a Ugandan who is there in Uganda, lives at the home?
Yes.
So when you, on a day-to-day basis as partners, kind of, I see that her task and role is caregiver. Well, what duties do you kind of place on yourself as kind of the partner to that home?
Yeah. I see myself as an ambassador for what is going on there, and also as a fundraiser. So she tells me what the greatest needs are, and then I do the fundraising on this part.
That's awesome.
But I also really speak into the direction that we need to head. I think because she's in the midst of being on the grounds, she can't really see from a 20,000 foot level. And when we have conversations, we want to help eliminate this issue, right? Of kids from Karamoja flooding down to the capital and begging on the streets. That is a huge issue. And we want to stop that. But if we are only caring for kids who are on the streets, then we're never going to be able to attack the issue at the root.
Right.
And so for her, seeing kids on the streets, she just wants to continue to rescue one by one. And as much as I want to as well, we could impact more lives if we do more of a policy route,
Right.
partnering with the government, thinking through ways that we can help do preventative care.
Wow.
How can we empower the community who are already in Karamoja to be able to care for their children long term so that they don't ever have to come onto the streets.
Wow. Have you made any headway in like communicating with the government in any
Yeah.
capacity?
So we just had an introduction to a local government leader on this trip. So I went a week before our team got there.
Wow.
We have land in Karamoja, 2 acres right now, and we've been dreaming about what we want to do with it. But one thing that I've learned at my current job is human-centered design, and we have an app that our software engineers developed called the Survey Tool app. And what happens is a lot of organizations or governments go out to the field to take surveys of communities for various reasons, and it's all done on pen and paper and clipboard. So an example of that is in the earthquake in Mexico, I think, what is it, like 5 or 7 years ago. By the time they finished surveying the people who were affected and inputting the information, it was 18 months.
Wow.
18 months. And the room for error for that. Papers get lost.
Yeah.
You can't read handwritings, etc. It might be typed in incorrectly. And so where I work now at News Story, they've created an app called the Survey Tool. And so when you're out in the field without internet, it stores all the information on a cloud. Once you go to Wi-Fi, it syncs immediately and you have real-time data. So you can analyze it immediately, figure out what the greatest need is, and create a plan.
Yeah.
And so I was able to take our survey toolkit and they were able to customize it for me so that we can go and survey the community around our land. We had an idea of what they needed and we weren't far off. But during our survey, we realized the greatest need was different than what we thought.
Oh.
And during that trip, we were able to meet with a community leader and talk about land ownership, because a lot of these people own land on a reservation, which is technically government property.
Oh.
So
they own it, but they don't really own it.
Right. So just that was our first introduction. And the hope is that we can continue to build a relationship with them so that we can attack some of the deep-rooted issues and help the community there. But the most immediate need in our community that we have land on is water. And so, we're just hoping to continue to build that relationship and that we can be on their good side.
I see. Yeah.
Because it's hard to work against the government.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to.
Yeah.
So,
Any partnerships you can make
yeah.
on the site is would be helpful, right? Oh, is that why on the collective effect? So the website for collective effect is thecollectiveeffect.org, right? And you guys have like a dedicated section for water. Is that why? Because
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I see.
So after that trip, we realized that people are walking up to 4 hours to get water.
Wow.
And the water source wasn't necessarily clean. So one of the homes that we went to, they showed us a picture of water that they received from the well. And it was just muddy. I mean, black. And so these people are drinking this. And another family, the husband was missing. And I was like, where's your husband? And she said, well, he went to go get water last night. And it was 10 a.m. I'm like,
Oh, wow.
your husband's not back from getting water? And she's like, no. And I'm thinking something happened to this
Yeah.
gentleman.
Yeah.
But lo and behold, an hour later, he returns back with water. And so these wells that they have around that community are very shallow. And so it only produces a certain amount of gallons of water per hour. So people get there and wait in line and then have to wait longer. So they said sometimes it takes them like 8 to 9 hours to make one trip because they have to wait for the water. And so family after family, the response was, we need water.
Wow.
And so we are currently raising money for a water project on our land. And so we are halfway there. It's a $10,000-ish to build a well. And so we're hoping in the next 2 months that we can raise the remaining $5,000.
So any listeners who are convicted by this or inspired by this to help support, how can they do that? What's the easiest way for them to support building of this well?
Yeah, so you can go to our website, the effect is EFFECT .org. And there's a tab at the top that says give, and you can give to the water project. And so, yeah, that's probably the easiest way. Or you can write a check.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so crazy to me that something as simple as water, something that we literally use to flush our like pee down the toilet, is so hard to come by in some locations.
Yeah. I mean, they even said one of the questions we asked was, how many meals do you eat per day? And I would say almost every family said that they eat one meal a day because of the lack of water.
Wow.
So they don't have water to cook the food or to drink. And so their whole life is completely altered because of lack of clean water. Yeah.
Wow. You know, and by the way, as a consultant, one of my main duties is data analysis. So I really appreciate how you got actual data to, like, you know, not only just figure out what's happening, but create actionable plans to help these people. That I don't know, satisfied something in me when I heard that.
You know, I never really thought about data like in the past until I started working where I work now at News Story. And I think in order to know what the needs are accurately is to have that data, is to survey the community. I think we walk a fine line of the white savior mentality of like, this is what a community needs. I'm going to come and save them. And you see all around the world where nonprofits and governments have built homes or put a program in place, and they're just completely like abandoned because they didn't involve the community. And so it's so important that their voice is heard, because we don't accurately know what the issues are and what the pain points are for communities. And so really important for us to partner with them and to involve them as much as possible, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to live there and to feel all the tensions that they feel every day. And it's their lives that are going to be impacted. And so we can come in with some educated guesses, but we just want to make sure that their voice is heard and that we have an accurate numbers and information for the community. So, yeah.
So your partner, Lydia, does she speak English?
She does.
Oh, okay.
She speaks English. She struggles a little bit with like written English. So it's a little hard with communication when I'm here. We operate through WhatsApp on a daily basis. And, but she doesn't have a computer, so she like writes everything down and takes pictures and sends me like, this is the budget. And so, it's fun and not fun as well. But yeah, she, ended up on the streets at a young age, and, through a Good Samaritan from a local church, saw her on the street and said, do you want to go to school? And she said, yes. And so this lady started sending her to school, provided her a place to live. Wasn't able to finish because her sponsor passed away while she was in high school. And her story is just kind of crazy. And I don't feel like I'm equipped to really share everything because it's so personal. But yeah, she's been through a lot. But thankful that she's gone through some of high school because she's able to communicate really well with me verbally. So.
Yeah, because I was going to ask if the language barrier is a challenge, but I'm assuming that Lydia helps out a lot as like kind of the translator.
Yes. When we're up in Karamoja, not a lot of people can speak English, Karamojong, and Luganda, which is spoken in Kampala. And she can do all three. And so before we started Collective, she was doing a lot of translation services for NGOs and the government. So they would take her and she would do that. So when we're surveying the community, it takes twice as long. I would say 3 times as long as I would like it to be. English, she translates into Karamojong and then has to come back to us. So there's room for error. And so we ask questions in 3 different ways just to make sure that the information's correct. But yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, yeah, that's the question I always have for people kind of on the ground in a mission field. Because language is such a big part of it, right? If you can't communicate, like you're talking about, if you can't communicate, you can't really figure out the needs of the people and all of that. But wow, it's great that you met Lydia, that you have such a awesome person, like a linguist, pretty much.
Yeah.
Speaks trilingual, right?
Yeah.
Have you picked up any of the language at all?
I can speak some Luganda. It's just like phrases here and there,
Yeah.
easy conversational pieces and buying things, that sort of thing. But for Karamajong, I don't, because it was actually our first time visiting our land. It's been a couple of years since we purchased it.
Oh, okay.
But it's about an 8 to 9 hour drive from the capital.
Oh, wow.
And so it's very time consuming, and you can't really do anything at night because it's a little dangerous up there. And so, yeah, just with the limited time that I have when I go, it was just hard to. But it also feels like it's the right season to start going up there. I felt like the Lord was stirring in me to start. We were trying to manage our home, the Akena home, with our kids for a long time. And I feel like it's the right time to start building there. And so it's really exciting. But going up there, honestly, I would like to take myself out of the equation as much as possible. And so for us going up there, I was concerned when we were doing surveys that they would see a white face, and the answers would change because sometimes they answer what you want them to answer.
I see.
And so, yeah, you just want to have an accurate answer. And so with that, taking us out of the equation, the quote, white people who are white skinned, you'll have more accurate answers. But it's hard to train Ugandans, as well, our partners, to not assume the answer.
Right.
And actually ask the question. And so that's also a challenge, because if there's 4 children sitting in front of you, they'll say, there are 4 children in this house. And you're like, but can you ask how many children they have? They're like, there are 4. And so you say, one more time, can you ask if they have other children? They're like, there are 2 more. You're like, dang it. But training them to actually ask the questions and not answer on behalf of people is really hard. And so this time around we had to go, but the idea would be that, you know, our local partners, our local team members would be able to run things on the grounds without us being involved.
I see.
And eventually that would be the case. Like, we hope to be sustainable and that we can pull out one day.
Right.
It's never the plan to be there forever. But that's really hard. And not a lot of organizations can pull out. I think I've only seen like a handful who are able to get something running and can pull out and be sustainable. And so that would be a dream if I could pull out.
That's kind of like the long-term vision.
Long-term.
Then can you talk a little bit about the Uganda trip? Because the Akena house? Is that Akena house? That's where I saw most of the photos, I think, during the trip. But like, can you explain just kind of what you hoped to accomplish during the trip, and what ended up happening and people's experience?
So like I said, because it's a vision trip, I want everyone to experience the beauty and the brokenness, because I think it's really hard to just experience the brokenness and leave with a false idea of what Uganda looks like.
Right.
And so I try to mix between people experiencing the hurt and the needs, and you know, we go on a safari so they can see the beauty of the land, and it also helps to create space to process what everyone's experienced during the week. And we don't just isolate experiences to being at the Akena home. I really like to create a more holistic journey for people. And so we partner with some other nonprofits and we go and visit them. And so preparing for the trip, we ask, what are your greatest needs? How can we step in? And
to
try
like
to
the local people there.
local nonprofits
I see.
that we're visiting and partnering with. And we try to lean away from projects that could involve locals. So painting a building is something you can pay a local and provide salary for a local person to do. So it's like, what can we do that a local person cannot do to, you know, help either. Like what we did at Project Orphans was one of the nonprofits we worked with. And for them, they're like, well, can you do workshops for our staff? So we split up, and James did a PT like workshop with the volunteers / people who like worked in the what is it? They have this new building called Blessings Cove, and it's for kids who have special needs. And so they do childcare during the day for them. So he was teaching them how these kids have been literally like laid on the floor for their whole lives and never, they have the capacity to move and be more mobile, but have never utilized their muscles. And so he was teaching them how to do daily exercises with certain kids. And then we had Nigel, who is amazing at speaking and hosting. And so he did a workshop with some of their church staff and how to engage the audience. And we had Jane, who was coming over and helping watch the children while the PT training was going on, and was able to build relationship and just love on these kids. And so we all split up into those different groups. And so they were able to utilize their personal giftings and to be able to pour into the staff. And so it was really cool to see them activate their gifts and just really come alive in what they're good at. But yeah, I think for the most part, the organizations that we partner with really tie into our story. So Project Orphans actually took 2 of our girls into their program, and they're called Pearls. So they took in girls who had been gone through like sexual abuse or physical abuse, and 2 of our girls had children from rape. And we're living in our home, really didn't have really a future living inside of our home. And so partnered with them, and they took them and just taught them trade. One of them, they both actually just moved down and graduated out of the program, which is really exciting. And one is going to be a security guard, and one is sewing. And so she is has her sewing business and is making uniforms for local schools. So it's really cool how all of these organizations are kind of tied together with the story of a street child. And so we try to do a narrative story for our teams who come versus it just being random service projects per se. But yeah.
You know, I really like how you guys don't do things that locals can do. Because I read an article a while back when, you know, the Tom's shoes. So they were talking about not that company in particular, but those kind of companies where they produce something and give it for free. They talk about how it can be really damaging to the economy, because if people are receiving something for free, then the people at those like local areas that actually make those things and make a living off of selling those things, if they no longer have a customer base because they're getting all these like free things, then it just destroys their livelihood. So it's like there's so much wisdom in like saying, hey, like this is something a local can do. Let's not touch that. Let's provide value on top of it, on top of what is currently available here. I think that's really awesome. That's amazing.
It's harder to strategize ways that we can bring in people from America into another culture and into another country and not do damage after a week of being there. And again, it doesn't feel as sexy because it's not like, I don't know, superhero-esque. But yeah, I think it is really important because it's a partnership. You know, we're not there. I don't know if you've read the book When Helping Hurts.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It's a very good book. It's intense. It takes a while because you have to study it. But they talk about different levels of desperation and when it's okay to give a handout and when it's not okay to give a handout. And so like a level of, you know, the level where you can give out handouts and it be not damaging to a community would be when there's an earthquake or natural disasters, that sort of thing, where there is no water, there is no food. You can only give to those people when there's war, conflict. But you know, they surveyed, I don't know the number exactly, but a high number of the surveyed people, when asked, what do you think poverty is? It was never related to materials. It was about their value. It was about feeling like I don't have a voice in my community. I'm embarrassed to invite people over. That sort of thing. So it was like self-worth was related to poverty. And so in that, how do we value people that we're working alongside? How do we tell them that they're worthy, and really empower them to rise up into being who God calls them to be, whether that's being a mom, a great mom to their child, and saying, you can do this. We're going to come alongside you and help you to care for your child, versus institutionalizing your child. And so it's harder. It takes a lot more time. It's harder to sell. It's not easy to market, definitely. But I really believe we want to do things the right way and holistically. And so that takes a lot more time. And
And, you know, I think this is related. I recently read a series of tweets of someone saying Americans are really good at, I think this person called it like acute sympathy, where it's when they can feel like a hero, like you were talking about, for something immediate, like pulling someone out of like a river or helping someone out of a burning building. But if that person went through some sort of injury, taking care of them and helping them throughout the recovery process, like Americans are terrible at. We're really good at the hero part, but the caregiver part, we're really bad at. So knowing that your organization is more about the caregiver aspect of, like, you know, helping people in the, it may, like you said, it might not be sexy and there's not like a huge draw to it, but the fact that you do that actually makes me want to support you more, because I think because there's not much of that, there's not a lot of that around. So the fact that the collective effect does that, that's awesome. So you should definitely think about supporting.
yes, please support us.
So a question, I know you mentioned that you kind of started off as I'm going to do this as a for-profit model. Do you ever think about going back to that, or do you think that ship has completely sailed?
So my idea of a fun night is, some of my closest friends, this is what we do like multiple times a week, is we don't plan for it. It just happens, but they come to my house, we sit on the couch, and we just brainstorm ideas. There's this problem, like, I shouldn't probably say this, but I'm going to trademark this. But I was like, when you're traveling in Paris or in New York, you're like, man, I wonder where there's a clean public bathroom. Right? So we're like, let's create an app that helps you find clean bathrooms, and we'll call it Potty People.
I like that.
So we're constantly thinking through ideas. I think I love starting things. Activator's not on my top 5 strength finders, but I really do love starting things and brainstorming ways that we can solve issues and solve problems. I think that's so fun to me. And so last year I was very, very committed to starting another business on the side, which I don't really have time for. But another thing that's really, I get really excited about is like zero waste type of lifestyle. I don't think it's like really possible to have zero waste, but yeah. So I think a lot of this is rooted in like biblical principles, right? And so one day I think as we teach trade within our nonprofit, and maybe being able to employ moms or people in the community to create things, there might be an aspect of like a storefront option. But I think I have tons of dreams, and so it totally is possible.
Yeah, because there's a podcast called How I Built This. And you've heard of it? Yeah. And the guy who started Tom's Shoes was there, and he talked. So he had all these crazy businesses that he did before. He had a lot of money, and he made, I think it was a trip to Mexico, right? And he just found someone making shoes, and he said, "Oh, let's sell these." And it kind of like just blew up overnight because people really resonated with the story. And so the collective effect has a really strong story. And I was just thinking it might be different from, you know, back when you tried to do it kind of first. Now that you have the story, maybe you couple the story with the product.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just I love brainstorming too. So I'm just throwing the idea out there. And I was just curious if it was something that you were playing around with in your head.
I haven't actually.
Okay.
I didn't think about the fact that now we do have a story. But I would love to. It would be awesome. And I mean, oftentimes I go and I'm like, why is this not here? Like, you go there and they don't have peanut butter crackers, but they have peanuts and they love our peanut butter crackers. I'm like, we should start a peanut butter cracker business
Yeah.
here, but a lot of my ideas for sustaining collective within our Uganda program, because I imagine this to be different in each community that we work in down the line, and different needs in different countries. Like, I have a huge heart for the Middle East. I would love to go into like Syria one day and whatever the need is to step into that and to partner with locals there. But here in Uganda, like every time I go, I'm trying to think like, what are the needs? How can it be sustainable here? How can we market something here so that we're not dependent on anyone in the US to fuel what's there? And so, I researched into like, we can make paper because there's tons of trees where like we can make peanut butter crackers. Oh, there's so many mosquitoes. Why don't we think about creating, a mosquito repellent candle, because they don't have electricity, but then the candles would be able to be good for, studying at night for kids. So, I'm constantly thinking through like ideas that we can, kick off there. And so I'm pretty sure one day we'll do something.
Yeah, and we'll all be watching because, I think it's important for, like I said before, us to be open to the fact that we need to play a role as caregiver. We can't just say, we pulled you out of the fire and now you pick up your life and try to make something out of it when you literally lost everything that you've known and had, right? So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out on a collective effect, and I'm very excited for to see what you guys continue to do. And one last thing about the collective effect that I wanted to talk to you about. We talked about it a little bit before we started recording, but so when Jane and James were in Uganda, I kept getting updates about their trip, and there were daily blogs, and the blog that really hit me it was a story of Joy, and Joy is a pseudonym to just protect her privacy. She's a 9-year-old girl, and she came in. And can you kind of tell us what happened in that situation?
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm gonna have to like prep myself to not actually say her name. Joy came into our care a couple of years ago, and she tends to withdraw to herself a lot. She looks angry all the time. She's a tough cookie. And it's just always been a struggle to break through that tough exterior. And this year we brought a nursing student and a nurse with us on this trip, which was really exciting for us. And we invited a local doctor to come, and they supported him because we have 20 kids. It takes forever to do physicals.
Yeah.
And so they went down the line and helped him. When we got to Joy, she said that she has pain when she urinates. And so we were like, well, it just might be an infection. Yeah. So we made an appointment, went to go to the clinic the next day. So the nurse and I went to go pick her up, and one of the older girls, just so that she had support. Yeah. And so we took her to the clinic, and I stayed in the lobby with the older girl. And because Gloria, the nurse, has a background in nursing, I encouraged her to go with Joy into the room. I didn't want her to be by herself with anybody, honestly. And so she went into the room, and later on, Gloria just kind of informed me of everything that went on. And the nurse, we all suspected that it probably wasn't an infection. And being that her personality is withdrawn and that she's very like harsh in personality, we assumed that something had happened to her in her past that we weren't aware of. And the nurse went in and asked her before they did the checkup, has anyone hurt you down here? And she said no, and proceeded to check her. And both Gloria and the nurse realized like that she didn't actually answer that question honestly. Yeah. And when the nurse left, Joy crawled into Gloria's lap, which was the first ever sign of physical affection, almost a sense of like this child, like I'm a child now and I need someone to care for me, because she's very independent. And Gloria just kind of held her in her arms and slowly asked her, hey, were you honest when she asked you that question? And Joy said, no. And so Gloria proceeded to ask her, like, has someone hurt you? And she said, yes. And then there's another fear of like, was it in our home? So she's like, was it at our home? And she said, no. It was before I came to Kenna home. And she's like, do you remember how old you were? And she said, I think I was like 3 or 4. So it was 5 or 6 years ago. And she remembers, and she said, do you remember who it was? And she said, no. And that day we had to wait for results to come back. And so we took her and the older girl to a restaurant, and both of them are kind of wide-eyed. And I asked, have you guys ever been to a restaurant before? And both of them were like, no, we haven't. So Joy is 9 and Lydia is maybe 16. So we sat down. I was like, you can order anything on this menu. And they're like, what? So they love fried chicken. So they ordered fried chicken and rice. And Gloria and I are just kind of feeling the weight of it all. And watching Joy, she started eating. And it was like she was in her own little bubble. Like she was, essentially sitting at her own table in her mind. And she was enjoying this meal on her own. And she just couldn't stop smiling. She was just smiling the entire time. And it brought both of us to tears because we had just walked through something that was painful that she probably has stuffed and tried to forget. And after that day, the following time when we went back to the home, it was like she was a different child. Just was brighter. I don't know. I think she knows that someone's going to care for her and that she has a safe place to live. But I think that in that moment, that day, she realized that like she has a safe place and that we really, truly care for her. And that we'll stand in the gap for her. And her personality just changed like 180 and after that experience. And before I left, I just whispered to her like Nakwagala, which means I love you. And she said it back to me, and I was shocked because normally she just looks at you and she just like beady eyes you. But she said it back to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, like there is breakthrough and there's some kind of healing that is coming to her through this experience. And so it was hard. We walked through some hard situations while we're there every year. And that was hard, but also really inspiring to see healing happen right before our eyes. So
the 16-year-old Lydia, is that the same Lydia? Okay.
Yeah, different Lydia.
Okay.
Yeah, Mama Lydia and then student Lydia.
I see. But the part of the blog that I really liked was the writer said in that moment of like questioning what happened, who did this, she realized that this child Joy still has a need to be a kid. And so like when she described you guys going out and like eating, all that kind of fun stuff, that was really awesome. Because again, I think we can get lost in the legalism of just like trying to fix certain problems, but not thinking about the long-term care for the long term. So, I mean, sure, in that moment, if you were able to exactly figure out who did it and put this person in jail, that would have been great. But if you have forgotten about the child, then like, what have you really won? What have you really gained, right? But the fact that you guys recognized that and said, hey, let's just take the day to like let her be a kid. That, I don't know if it's because I'm a dad now, but it's something about that really like, at first reading that blog, it like broke my heart, but reading that second part, it like really like brightened it. So if you guys are curious, all the blogs are still up on the website, right?
Yeah,
it's
they're
under
still
the
there.
section UG blog. Those stories are all really great. So I would recommend you guys go check those out. Anything else about the collective effect you want to kind of highlight or talk about?
Well, I guess just like a call to action.
Yeah.
I think, so you listen to this episode and God is stirring your heart, whether that's like through a dream that you have, something that moves you, whether it's, human trafficking or something else, a cause. I think the encouragement is to step out. And, before we started this, talked about how it just takes a step.
Yeah.
You just have to make a step towards it. It was the scariest thing for me to buy the domain. I was like nervous. It's only like $12.99. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's official.
Yeah.
But to not be afraid to step out, just take one step at a time. And if you feel moved specifically towards what we're doing, that I would like to encourage people to be a part of our community.
Yeah.
We have a program called House Parents, and it's a monthly giving program that goes 100% of it. Your giving goes towards our Kenna home. So it covers food, medical care, and schooling for our kids. School's expensive. Just this term, we were calculating is going to cost us $6,000 for one term
Wow.
for our kids. And so it adds up really quickly. And our house parents are the reason why we're able to do this.
Yeah.
And so we're looking for more house parents. It's $35 a month. And then if you just want to do a one-time donation, like you can do that on the website as well. And if you feel really moved to go to Uganda, you can also reach out. And I think there's a contact us portion on our page. So you can just contact us and let us know you're interested and we can start the conversation.
Oh, that's so awesome.
Yeah.
I'm really hoping that people, if you feel moved by it, I really hope you don't sleep on that feeling. Because that's a beautiful thing, to be moved to help other people in a completely different part of the world.
I just recently listened to Christine Kane talk about compassion, and what she said was like the church confuses feelings with compassion, empathy or sympathy. Compassion is stopping what you're doing and crossing the road and helping the person. It's driven to action. So just feeling bad about something, it's not compassion. Like you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And so what I want to encourage people is if you're impacted by this, something's moving in you, to like interrupt your life and to make a step towards doing something, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And I tried to keep these episodes to around an hour. We're at the 56-minute mark. So I actually wanted to talk to you a little bit about your current day job, because we alluded to it a few times throughout the episode, and it sounds super interesting to me. So can you kind of explain what it is that the company, is it News Story? News Story.
Yeah. News Story. We are a housing nonprofit. Our mission is to pioneer solutions to end global homelessness. And so what that looks like is we do a lot of research and development. Our current project that we're working on is the first 3D printed community in Mexico.
So cool.
Really, really cool. We are trying to find ways to equip other housing nonprofits, organizations, governments to be able to find a faster, more cost-effective way to provide affordable housing to people around the world. Homelessness is over 1 billion person issue, and it's only going to get worse. And so how do we equip people to create change so that people don't live in survival mode anymore? Yeah. So that's what we do.
So I need to ask you, because I feel like you're a very strategic kind of person. Did you get involved with News Story, thinking somehow it can translate to either equipping you to pour out in Uganda, or something along those lines, where you can make a connection between the two? Or was it just it just happened?
It actually just happened.
Oh, okay.
I was working for a church for 6 years, and a friend of mine who works at News Story reached out to me and said, hey, I think you'd be a great fit. And so kind of on a whim, I applied. And I just felt like through the process that God was confirming that it was time for me to step out. It was the scariest thing for me, because 6 years of working somewhere, you build relationships and confidence in where you're at. So it'll be a year next month.
Wow.
In a couple weeks. And it's the best decision I made. The team is amazing. Our culture is amazing. Our mission is right in line with what makes my heart beat as well. And it just fits. So I wasn't actually strategic about this move, but I'm learning so much, and it's impacting the way that I approach the way that we do things at Collective Effect. And they've been so supportive of me throughout this year, just financially, and even just providing wisdom when I have a problem and I don't know how to solve it. And so, it's been the best experience.
Wow. That's that's crazy how sometimes the Holy Spirit moves in us. Because from an outsider's perspective, it totally looks like, oh, she chose that job so that she can transfer it to, what she's doing with the collective effect. But because even with, like, you were talking about the app to collect surveying data, that's from, you said, News Story,
Yeah.
right? So you already there, you were able to
Yeah.
transfer some of that value.
Yeah. And I would have never thought to survey the community. So I think there's a lot of fruit that's coming from me being a part of the News Story team. And I honestly don't even think of it as my day job because I love it so much. And it's really a part of like my heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I feel really like fortunate to be able to do that, but also continue to do collective on my side.
Right.
So yeah, I just feel like my cup is so full.
That's
and
awesome.
I get to really like live a life of purpose in what I'm passionate about. So
Yeah. And the church that you worked at, if I'm remembering correctly, was Passion, right? How was that? Just to briefly, like, that's such a huge church.
Yeah.
And they have what, campuses in what, Washington, D.C. Is that it? Aren't there other?
There's
other
two
things?
here in Atlanta and then one in DC.
Yeah. So how is it working for such a huge, like, church organization?
Yeah. Well, I came from a Korean church, so
Right.
very, very small. I remember going to Passion Conference for the first time when I went to college. It was in Nashville. So that tells how old I am. But that is the moment where God opened my eyes to the global missions and global world. That's where my heart like ignited.
Yeah.
And so Passion has been a part of my story and has really impacted my life. And I never, ever would have imagined that I would be working for Pastor Louis Giglio and that I would be a part of this team years later. But again, organically, I just started volunteering my time during the recession, couldn't get a job. So I was constantly at church, just helping in whatever way possible. And slowly they're like, can you contract for this? Can you contract for that? And then later on, a full-time contracting. And then I really wanted to be a part of our church side. And so I was serving in our kids ministry. And so the kids director asked me, like, would you want to do this full time? And I was like, yes, absolutely. I've always dreamed of doing full-time ministry. And so again, like, it was just being obedient step by step and really just, pouring my life into what I felt like the Lord had put in front of me and doing that well with excellence. And yeah, just God just being faithful through that. And, as I look back on the years, I'm like, wow, like the dots that God connected. And I would have never imagined the journey would look this way. But working in a large church is hard.
Yeah.
You have to really, no one's going to protect your time or your heart or your spiritual life. You are in charge of that. And so there were times where I felt like I was spending time with the Lord because I needed to do my job well and to lead people, but not to enjoy him on my own. And so there was a lot of learning experience in that of like, no, like the end goal of this time spending like in the word is to just know you more and to be with you. And so, slowing yourself down in the midst of event after event, church meeting after church meeting, was something that, God grew me in. And but Passion taught me to do things with excellence.
Wow.
And to be able to dream big, because that's how Louis is. He wants to do the impossible. And as soon as he sees like a spaceship lift off the ground an inch, he's like off to the next thing. He's like, oh, it's possible. What else isn't possible?
Right.
And so I think that has over the years instilled in me to dream bigger and to believe for more.
Yeah. And would you say that kind of influenced the creation or the start of the collective effect?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I think definitely being a part of Passion really inspired me to, step out, do something, just do it. That's like my motto for this year's Nike. Just do it.
Yeah. Actually, I've been encouraging a lot of people through this podcast to do the same. If there's something you want to do, but you fear for it for whatever reason, just try it. Even if you're not good at it at first, you're gonna get better if you keep at it, right?
Yeah.
So that's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. If you guys are interested in somehow partnering with the collective effect or partnering with what was the house?
A Kenna home.
The Akena home and becoming
A house parent.
House parent, right? Sorry. Yeah, becoming house parent. Please go to the website, The Collective Effect, effect with the E.org. And there's the contact us. All that information should be there. And any messages or questions you may have, your email is just info at thecollectiveeffect.org, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so please get in contact with Christina. I don't know you that well, but she's so easy to talk to. She's so open. So please do so if you felt anything moving in your heart. And usually I give out information about how to contact me, but I'm not gonna do that today because I want you guys to just contact Christina. Because if this episode resonated with you, you don't have to tell me. Just tell her. And yeah, let's figure out a way for this community to really get behind the collective effect and stop just being quote unquote superheroes, but let's be caregivers and let's partner with these people and let's care for them in the long run, not just in that instant where they need immediate help. So once again, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's
Yeah.
such a joy to share with you and
Yeah.
to spend this time with you.
And I'm hoping as you continue with the collective effect, as there are updates or new things that you're doing, please feel free to come back anytime and share with us. We would love to hear and get updated on how everything is going.
I love that. Will
Awesome.
do.
All right. Well, thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye.